Hannah Allen here. She is the Program Manager of Watershed and Sustainability, and she's going to be speaking about her Catching Rain program. I'm also looking forward to doing a rain garden workshop with her later on in August, so be sure to stay in tune for that. But if you could guys give Hannah a warm welcome, that'd be great.
So, an introduction about myself. I'm kind of blocking the screen. I don't know which way to go. Like Allie said, my name is Hannah Allen. I'm the Program Manager of Watershed and Sustainability for the city, which encapsulates a lot of different things. When I was first hired on, I mostly focused on the rain garden program, which I'll talk about some today, and then started taking over some of the projects that had more aspects of green infrastructure. So in coordination with the piping and sewer and all of the culverts that they were placing, they were doing green infrastructure to finalize some of those projects and do additional filtration and water quality and quantity benefits. So my role has kind of evolved over the time. I was the first person in this role, so they didn't exactly know what all would be in that, but I work a lot with local watershed organizations for implementation projects and continue to work on green infrastructure for city projects. So, some of the workshop outline. We'll do an introduction of what the Catching Rain program is and what our rain garden program consists of, as well as what are native plants. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with that. I gave this similar presentation to the Master Gardeners Club earlier this year, and they said they learned something. So hopefully you guys will learn something, not necessarily with native plants, but with all of the things in this presentation. Some of the benefits of native plants and how it is beneficial to our water systems and our management of our waterways. That's a huge thing for all of the projects that I do, is that they have to be beneficial for stormwater management. Because I work for the utility, they have to have some sort of benefit to our water systems. The importance of maintenance on some of our projects in our rain gardens around the city, and then different practices and techniques. The last couple things are seasonal maintenance, what you can do in different seasons, some case studies of city projects, and lessons learned. I think it's great to highlight all of the good things that happen, but it's also really important to highlight where we can improve, because the city just started doing projects like these, and there's always ways we can learn and get input from the community. Community involvement in future events that are happening, and then any questions at the end. So I just have a couple quotes sprinkled in throughout the PowerPoint, and I won't read them line by line, but I'll just put them up for a second.
Hannah, can you move a little so we can
Yes, sorry. I don't know where to put myself up here.
You're good.
Okay. And then what is a native plant? So essentially native plants are plants that were found in the area before development happened. And native plants and species are genetically adapted to local growing conditions. So they do well with our soil types, the amount of water that we get, and the sun and soil level combination that we get here. So a lot of them span from prairie plants in certain areas of Indiana to wetland plants, even though we don't have a lot of them existing still. And then what is a rain garden? This one maybe you guys are a little less familiar with. The city has a rain garden program, and it is for capturing some of the water and flooding that happens in individuals' yards. You can have them on your private property, or there are schools or churches or other organizations like Science Central that have them and can install them as like a demonstration rain garden, and you're also put on a registration map with the city so that we can identify who's part of our program. But a rain garden is a depression in the land that usually has native plants or perennials of some sort in them that holds water and helps to filter it without having sheet runoff go directly into our stormways. So they're usually located near a downspout, and they catch the water and help it filter into the ground as opposed to running straight off of the surface and into our storm pipes and getting into our rivers without being treated or filtered at all. So this is a little demonstration. I'll put this down for a second. This is a berm, and this is a demonstration of what you would do if it was built on a hill, which usually they are. They're in a naturally depressed area of the yard, or they're on a hill from the downspout. and you dig out the center of the hill and then use that soil that you remove to build a berm around the outside. So it holds the water in there as opposed to just falling in there and then creating erosion coming out the other side. So this is usually for a hill. For like a flat surface, you would still dig out the center and create a berm, but there would be a berm on both sides of it. It would just be a gradual increase into the inside part of the berm. We don't want to solve every flooding problem with a rain garden. If your property holds water for more than a day or two, usually rain gardens won't filter all of that water off. They're a good tool, but they're not the solution to everything. Catching Rain is our sustainability program as a whole with the city, which includes a bunch of different things from green landscaping, homeowner solutions, BMPs, which are best management practices, and that is like detention basins, two-stage ditches, different holding ponds. It's a variety of about 32 different best management practices. And those are required for any construction in the city that's an acre or more. They have to have some sort of BMP installed after the construction is complete. We also have information on green design standards for any of our contractors who are wanting to do green infrastructure in some of their projects, and then our rain garden program within that Catching Rain title. The goal when this started in, I think it was 2014, was 1,000 rain gardens. And this, I need to update this number, it's like 135 now. But at the beginning of the year, it was around 100 rain gardens, and they had a lot of momentum at the beginning when it first started. And then right as it was really ramping up, COVID came, and all of the workshops were moved online. So it kind of fizzled out for a while. And then when I have come into this position, I picked it back up and have started doing workshops again and making things available online as well if people can't attend in-person workshops. So if you want to join this movement, you could move it up to closer to 200, hopefully. So for our rain garden program, I have some of the paperwork up here, but we have a full manual online. There's an incentive if you live within the city limits where you can get $2 per square foot up to $250, and that could be for mulching or soil amendments or for the plants themselves. And you just submit a application and the design of your rain garden, and you'll get a check sent to you in the mail, not cash, a check, and you'll need a W-9, and then we will put it on the registration map. And that's really helpful for some of our other departments like neighborhood code or right-of-way, so that they're able to identify that this is a native planting as opposed to like a weed citation, which is what happens a lot of the times. Official. Monitoring is something that we just started doing, and that's a yearly thing that also helps with those other departments. And that's just basically submitting a photo and telling that your rain garden is still working the way it's intended to. More information on homeowner solutions. We have grass cycling, composting, and our biosolids facility where you can get free biosolids if you go and pick them up yourself. Gardens. And then green design is like low impact development, green roofs, permeable pavement, all of which we try to work into our city projects. And then benefits of native plants. Biodiversity. For a lot of the projects that the city does, we get grants for our green infrastructure projects because we implement certain aspects for biodiversity, or focusing on a specific fish species or a butterfly habitat or something similar to that. Like we just removed Spy Run Dam back behind Science Central, and we got a grant from the Fish and Wildlife to remove that so that there could be a corridor for the fish to move through again, and it wasn't blocking it with the dams. There is also ecosystem resilience because these plants were adapted to grow in this area. They don't need as much maintenance to continue to grow. And again, they're very low maintenance. They're also great for stormwater management. We had a tests done on our city rain gardens about a year and a half ago, and it showed that they were filtering water much faster than the rest of the surrounding areas. They didn't hold water for quite as long, so depending on what your goal is for your garden, you can amend the soil to either do more water quality benefits where it holds the water for a little bit longer, or more quantity benefits where it moves the water off the surface a bit faster. So most of our gardens about a day or so. They're great for erosion control because they're usually located in areas that have really high moving water, fast moving water. And they're great for aesthetic appeal because usually if you're planting native plants, they bloom at 3 out of the 4 seasons of the year. And even in the winter, they're great for birds and getting seeds throughout the winter as a source of food. So they're a little bit prettier throughout all of the seasons as opposed to a quick bloom time and then they kind of wilt away. Maintenance. We want to focus on plant health, making sure that they're regularly inspected to make sure that they're healthy. Weed control, soil health, and safety. Again, working with the other departments in the city is not the safety of the plants, but it's making sure that they don't go onto other people's properties or they're not blocking areas where there needs to be good visibility. So, I'm sure you all saw this big demonstration over here. This is switchgrass, and it's a accurate representation of about how big the plant is above the ground. And then all of these are representing the roots underneath the ground. And you can see it makes it all the way at least up to this first table. The roots are usually about 10 to 12 feet long, so that gives an idea of how much more water this is able to take up than like a typical bluegrass, Kentucky bluegrass or lawn grass. And this is how long our regular lawn grass roots are. So comparing this to that, and this is another little blue stem plant with its root system. And obviously these plants are a lot taller than our regular lawn grass, but there's a place for everything. So it's just to help comprehend how installing some of these could really decrease the amount of water that was on your property and could help filter things a lot better. And because their roots are so long, if there's periods of drought, they're able to access water a lot further down. And if there's a lot of rain, they're able to take up a lot more water than something like this. And then continuing on to maintenance, we have our new monitoring program. And like I said, it's like a fully self-led monitoring program. There's 10 to 12 questions, and then you submit a picture at the end. And that is for making sure that we have accurate records. Like I said, this program started in 2014, so there's a lot of people who have moved from their property. There's people that might not want to maintain their rain garden anymore, and we want to make sure that we are giving an accurate representation of what the rain garden should be. So we want to have good quality rain gardens with good native plants and perennial plants out there so people can see that this is something good and beneficial that they should be doing as well. Watering, you don't really need to water that often, especially after the first or second year. If you put plugs in, they'll usually take off within the first year or so. If you put seeds in, they take at least a year to pop up most of the time because they have to establish all their roots before the plant comes up above ground. So a lot of times if you get a seed mix, it'll have an annual in it that comes up that first year just to hold everything in place and leave space for the natives that are going to come up. But I did a rain garden at my own property this last year and did plugs in it, and it is overflowing this year. So it's really cool to see how quickly they establish and how well they do around here. Weeding and trimming, if you keep your garden weeded the first year or two, it usually naturally fills in with specific plants in different niche areas in different parts of your rain garden. So if you really make sure that it's well maintained in that first year or so, it does a pretty good job at continuing to maintain itself. And that's not to say that you don't have to do any maintenance. There's still going to be weeds that come up, but it does a lot better than a lot of our other annual and perennial plants because it just naturally fills in. And some people deadhead their plants And if you're going to do that, you usually want to do that in early spring because So maintenance by the season. Spring is pruning, planting, and mulching. Summer is pretty much just monitoring for any weeds that pop up or any pests that start to attack some of your plants. Fall is cleanup and seed collection if you want to replant in a different area, deadheading and preparation for winter. Fall is also the best time to plant seeds because, like I said, they need at least a year to come up, and the winter is actually good for them as an overwintering period for them to settle into the ground a little bit before the roots start to establish. So it's best to plant them in the fall. You can plant them in the spring, but then they're immediately hit with that really hot weather and it might stunt some of the growth. And then in the winter, just feed the animals with the extra seed plant. And then this is more of our green infrastructure and case studies of rain gardens that we've done around the city. This one is at Lakeside Middle School, and this was one of our first demonstration rain gardens that we installed. There were 14 that were put in with the initiation of this program. And this one is a very difficult one to follow through. They initially put all of the same plants in all 14 of the rain gardens, so that will not work in every location. There's different requirements at every location, so you can't expect the same plants to flourish at every location. They also, if you see in this last photo, a berm should not be that drastic. That's like a wall drop off. And so I think they were rushing to get this one done when they installed it, and erosion started to occur on the outside of this one. So they had gone back in and kind of sloped that berm a little bit more. And this is one of our only rain gardens that's a demonstration rain garden that does not have a storm drain in it. So it holds a lot of water, and the closest storm drain is over the sidewalk on the street. So it was just not super well developed, and it will hold a lot of water and kind of flood the area for a couple days, at least in these initial stages. This was, I think, the third or fourth year after planting, and you can see that there's not a lot of diversity in this garden, and that's because all of the same plants were put in all of the gardens. So certain things just naturally started to take over. Again, they did more grading around this area so that it wasn't flooding so badly and it wasn't continuing to erode. And we have continued maintenance at all of our rain gardens. So we do have restoration service providers that will go in and clear out different invasives or clear out certain species that are starting to take over and replace them with different natives. This was later on, and they added the daylily perimeter, and this was just redone this last year again, hopefully for the last time. And I removed the daylilies because I'm trying to keep all of our rain gardens completely native. But it did help with the schools because they maintain the area around the rain garden, and sometimes they're not able to differentiate the lawn and the rain garden or where they should stop cutting. So we have multiple rain gardens that we've had to continue conversation with the school maintenance team so that they're not mowing down. And then these are two of our larger green infrastructure projects outside of just the rain garden program. Camp Scott. Does anybody know where Camp Scott is? Have any of you been to Camp Scott? Good, okay. So this is just some history, and I need to make the font on this a little larger, but during World War II, it was a training camp for the men going to war, and then transitioned into an overflow prisoner of war camp and housed about 600 Germans that did agricultural work in the area and did a lot of the street cleanup here in Fort Wayne. And after the war was over, the camp was transitioned back into housing for the returning GIs, and they paid $22.50 a month to live there. And after the last building fell in 1977, it was transformed into a marsh because it was unmaintained, and it unfortunately became just the local dumping site for a lot of people. So there was a lot of debris and litter that was there when the city purchased it. City Utilities purchased it and began updates in 2003 and completed the wetland in 2007. So this specific site has a huge holding tank under McMillan Park, which is a couple blocks away. And then it's pumped into this site into a multiple different basins or ponds and through multiple different wetlands around the site. And then there's an overlook in the back, which I'll show in some images, but then that gate can be opened and the water is just discharged into the river. So it goes through multiple series of filtration before it makes it to the river, and it helped alleviate flooding in about 500 homes in the area.
So where's the location?
It is off of Oxford Street.
Okay.
But you can't vote in at the same time.
No, it is locked to the public most of the time, but if you call me or call 311, they can set up a tour pretty much at any time throughout the week. We do open houses at least 3 times a year there, and there are multiple other camps that we have sometimes with, like, there's a Montessori school that I'm doing a tour for there. We have it open for World Wetlands Day every year. So there's a couple different opportunities to come see it. Or there's birding groups that meet there sometimes and go birding around the site. It's about a 3/4 mile path from front to end if you walk the whole perimeter. And like I said, it helps collect a lot of stormwater from the surrounding communities and has a 1.7 million gallon underground storage tank that pumps the water up through a false waterfall and into some of the ponds. And then these are some real photos of the site. This is the overlook that has the gate underneath it that outlets the water into the river. And then this is one of the pond areas with some like rose mallow on the side of the pond.
What river?
It's the St. Mary's River.
St. Mary's, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then this is Beckett Stream. Camp Scott is one of our more successful sites, and I think that's partially because it is locked to the public, and I would love to have it open to the public, but Beckett Stream, we have a lot of camps there, and I'm really glad that the kids get to use them. But this past year we put in riffles to help renaturalize the stream, and like halfway through the summer, half of the rocks were out of the stream because the kids were taking them out on their river walks. So we just have to continue to work with the public and let them know what these sites are for, because we want them to enjoy them, but we also need them to function as they need to. So Beckett Stream is on the back side of Solomon Farms, where the covered bridge is off of Till Road. And this whole project started because the road was falling into the stream. The stream was directly beside the road, and it was starting to erode into the stream. So they rerouted the stream, and like I said earlier, I'm not an engineer, and I love my engineers, but sometimes they do really silly things. So they rerouted this stream, and I think I have an image of it here. This is what they came up with and what was accepted by the Army Corps and IDEM. So it's very engineered. I don't know what other words to say. It is very abrupt in the way that it changes. It's not a natural flow. And the different colors in this are different agencies that are monitoring parts of the site. Because when they rerouted this, it went through an existing wetland. And so they had to mitigate all of that area at different parts of the site or off-site at what we call Beckett's Interceptor, which is just down the road.
Can you talk about what that means to mitigate?
Yes. So when you affect a wetland, you have to rebuild a wetland in the same watershed. Usually, hopefully in the same area, but it has to be at least within the same Huck 8 watershed. So within X amount of miles, and where the water would naturally flow to, which is what a watershed is where the water all collects in a single area. So for wetlands, usually it's a 3-to-1, where you have to mitigate 3 times the amount that you take away. So you have to install more than you take out. So it's obviously highly recommended you don't do it anyway, but you have to add more if you. And then this is a photo of the site from last year. The sun makes it hard to see, but there's the covered bridge in the back, and then all of the shrubs and things down here are from those coir logs that I was talking about. And so that included like buttonbush and a lot of different sedges and grasses, and they really helped to establish the banks of the stream. And so far, we're supposed to have release of the site, the entire site this year. And this is like year 14 for this site. So I'm really hoping that we get it done. So long as at least, I think it's 60% of the trees that we replanted live, then we will get it released. So the deer can have 40% and they leave 60% for us. Lessons learned. Native plants are often viewed as weeds, unfortunately, so we're doing a lot of education and outreach for that. If you're doing it on a private property or near other homes, it's good to use fewer species and group them so that they're more easily identifiable for other people in the community and hopefully won't get as many complaints. Routine maintenance is needed by knowledgeable individuals and usually for much longer than you actually think. For a lot of our restoration specialists that we hire, they won't take on any jobs unless they're 3 years. So they have to have 3 years at least to help reestablish the site if there's an invasive problem, because you're not going to eradicate the species in a year or two. Also, green infrastructure is not the solution to every problem, and rain gardens can be a helpful and beautiful addition in the right context.